Hey everybody, welcome to your horoscopes for the week. These are the horoscopes for the week ending March 18th. We've got St. Patrick's Day this week and it's on a Friday. So that's kind of cool. You can really party hardy. Especially when it's at the end of the week. We're gonna jump on into it here. We continue to have a retrograde free week also, which is nice. All planets moving in forward movement direction, no retrograde action kind of coming in to hold us back. So that's a bit of a challenge that's eliminated for us basically at this time, which is really nice as well. Things have been kind of weird, and kind of screwy and feeling like they're just not going anywhere. They're getting worse for a long time. So hopefully this overall, all planets moving forward kind of helps us all to find some solutions to our current challenges. We're going to go ahead and get started here with Aries. We have Venus in your sign for just this week. By the end of the week, Venus will be out of Aries. And as she leaves her sextiles with Saturn, which is very much focused on long-term goals, and Mars, which is focused right on the cusp of self and that trauma closet, is like literally right smack dab in the middle. And while releasing our trauma is unpleasant and we kind of look at that as a negative, actually releasing and healing our trauma really helps us to grow as stronger individuals that don't allow so many triggers to kind of hold them back from what it is that they want to achieve in terms of their long-term goals. So it is very, very necessary to focus on releasing some of that inner trauma in order to move past that, if that makes sense. I kind of see this I kind of see this setup here, and actually it is a grand sextile. I kind of see this setup here as just a reminder to kind of go back to your original goals, make sure you're still on track with your original goals. I think all signs have a tendency to get distracted, but Aries has so much energy sometimes that you tend to get distracted maybe a little bit more. And it's always a good idea to go back to the drawing board and just make sure that you're still in line with what you set out to do, if that makes sense. Jupiter continues to be in Aries as well, and will of course continue to be in Aries for a while. Jupiter is in a position right now focused on your support system and not really working with any other planets, if that makes sense. Aspecting any other planets is what I was trying to say. So that's actually a really good thing. It's Jupiter on its own promoting growth in terms of your support system. I know it's come up in previous weeks. I do believe, at least I'm thinking it's come up. Maybe I'm just imagining it. Um, but what has come up is, in terms of your support system, it's growing that support system and making sure that you have support, specific support for what you need at the time. So if you are trying to build a business, you need support in marketing and advertising, in business development, in things that maybe you're not as familiar with as other people. And so taking the time to look for that support, not wait for it to come to you, because it doesn't work very well. I mean, it does, but it takes a really long time. To go out and look for that support will help you to be able to manage your time in the way that you need to in order to achieve those goals, specifically career goals with that particular example. But whatever goals that you have, you want to look for support in the things that are more difficult for you, that don't come naturally to you. I'm not a natural bookkeeper. I'm not a natural numbers person at all. Astrology is the only mathematics that I'm really good at, which turned out to be kind of convenient for me, actually, because it was always that way. And so that becomes a major block in terms of my own career goals. Finding a bookkeeper that I can trust, and finding somebody to work with that can answer those questions for me in a way that makes sense to me meant everything in terms of being able to run my business. So you have to go out and find the support that you need in order to make sure that you're successful. And this week with Jupiter's influence is really good for that. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Taurus, we continue to have Uranus in Taurus. Of course, it's not going anywhere for a while. We're about halfway through, which means it's been about 3.5 years. We got about 3.5 more years left to go, basically. We're going to kick off this week, actually, with Uranus in opposition with the moon. The moon is in Scorpio this week. Pardon the cats. Crazy cat. The moon is in, we're kicking off the moon in Scorpio this week. So Uranus's focus is very much on the cusp of your support system and your trauma closet, which is kind of not exactly the most comfortable place for that to be. The moon's focus is on your daily schedule. So I see this challenge or difficulty sort of playing out in such a way as to where you have specific plans for this day. Somebody else is coming in and either rearranging your plans by taking over or by being late or what have you. And this is a pattern that creates an emotional response over and over again. I actually have a client that has a problem with most of her family members not valuing being on time. When they say they're going to be somewhere at a certain time, they wind up being 3 hours late all the time. It's very frustrating to her, but it's not just a frustration. This very quickly can turn into an I'm not important enough for you to be here on time situation that triggers I'm not important enough for other things that exist inside of your past trauma. So unfortunately, what happens is a random somebody not being on time can turn into a serious emotional situation for you if you let it. And that's really the key there, is if you let it. You don't want it to become part of a root, because it may be similar, but it's a completely different situation. And it also opens you up for overreaction, especially if you overreact and then find out later that it actually was an emergency and now you feel bad because you overreacted. We just want to, avoid that if possible. Luckily, that's only for a day, and then the moon moves on. The good news is Uranus's sextiles with the sun and Mercury are actually very helpful this week, all week long. The sun and Mercury are focused on career. We, of course, continue to have Uranus focused right in the middle of that support system and that trauma closet. But in all honesty, how I see this playing out actually is finding the right support for your career. It's great to find support, but finding the right support for your career, that's really what it comes down to. And I feel like this may be coming up because the support that you do have is just not quite where it needs to be right now. And so rather than having an emotional outburst over the fact that the people that are there can't hang, you need to find the support of people that can hang. And just like I said for Aries, you can't wait for the support to come to you or expect the support you have to be supportive in all things. You have to find the right support system. So if there are things that are lacking there, this is a really good opportunity for you to find what it is that is going to be helpful to you, if that makes sense. Outside of that, we got one little challenge there at the beginning of the week, and then things calm down. Oh, wait, I just lied. Actually, I totally lied to you, because Venus moves into Taurus at the end of this week. That was a big lie. Venus moves into Taurus at the end of this week. Now, Venus is Taurus's ruling planet. So when a planet and a sign come together, it's magic. This happens a lot, of course, because Venus does move around the circle pretty quickly. As Venus moves into your sign, she moves into a grand sextile with Mars as well as Saturn. For those first few days that she is in your sign. Mars is very much still focused on that trauma closet place there. And so when we're talking Mars and trauma, we're talking old anger coming up. This is a positive aspect. It is. Although it does sound not quite so positive because, of course, we're bringing up old anger here. That's never pleasant, right? Saturn's focus is on your long-term goals. So we have this sort of energy going into your long-term goals, and yet we're talking about past anger. A lot of times that past anger stops us from being motivated to move forward in our long-term goals. So a good example of that really has a lot to do with, let's say you're growing your own business right now, and one time you did a Facebook Live and somebody was mean to you when you did that Facebook Live. What happens from then on out is you probably won't do a Facebook Live because you're constantly that memory, even if 10 people thought it was great, that one person was mean to you is going to stand out. Unless you work through that trauma and let it go and release it, it will keep you from doing a Facebook Live from here on out. So it is really good to release that anger and to go back and to work on it, because it will literally stop you for as long as you allow it to stop you. And we all have about 10 million of those little things that are stopping us every single day. And most of us don't even realize that it comes from something that happened, in some cases, so long ago you don't even remember it. So that is where it becomes convenient. Where it becomes a little bit inconvenient is Venus's square with Pluto, and Pluto is focused on finances. So you may have all the support in the world, but not quite the financial support that you need, which is so frustrating. But rather than, again, allowing this to be something that holds you back, be productive in your search for financial support in terms of looking at what you have, looking at what you can get together, and coming up with a plan to get the rest of the money, if that makes sense. Also, it's not just about whether you have money or don't have money. It has a lot to do with how you use your money. And there are many, many times where actually finding a professional for that financial support does make that a lot easier, because they have the access to all that information right off the bat, and it makes it easier for you. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Gemini, we continue to be focused on that trauma closet for one more week. And then I promise we are going to finally, I do believe, be able to move out of that. Actually, I just, yes, we will be able to move out. The astrologer needs to learn how to read her charts here for a minute. Okay. But you Geminis would understand that, because just like you, I have about a bazillion browsers open in here too most of the time. So bear with me. I apologize for that. We continue to have Mars in your sign as well. We're not quite out of the water yet, but Mars should be leaving here in the next week or so, because we're right at the very end. And in that very end, this week, Mars is moved into a grand sextile with Saturn as well as Venus. Venus's focus is on your support system. Saturn's focus is on long-term goals. We're still focused on that trauma closet there. I still continue to see this as an opportunity to let go of traumas, past traumas that are holding you back from your present. Or if you can't let go, at least find a way to separate the two. What happened in the past happened in the past. the present doesn't necessarily have to follow suit with what happened in the past, if that makes sense. Also, I feel like in many cases, for a lot of you Geminis, because Mars is very much involved in this, and Mars usually means anger, especially when we're talking about inner trauma. We all hold a lot of anger inside of us from past events. And I feel like this is an opportunity to kind of help release some of that so that you have some room to be able to add something new. If you're full of anger, there's not a whole lot of room for happiness. There's not a whole lot of room for love. You just are an angry person. And that's no fun for anybody. Not physically, not mentally, not emotionally. It's no fun for the people around you. It's no fun for you. So taking the opportunity to identify when these things are coming up and just sort of coming to terms with them really helps you to avoid being that angry person, which nobody wants. We also have Mars in a square with the Sun and Mercury, which are both focused on career. Now, again, old anger coming up is definitely going to have an effect on your current job. And specifically, if some of the situations that you're going through at work are mimicking situations from the past. So it's very important to take the time to step away for a minute to analyze what's going on, to separate old feelings from how you feel right now, and to be able to come up with a way to communicate your feelings in a way that's constructive. And in, of course, in a way that you're not going to lose your job. Obviously, you want to make changes where changes are needed without, while avoiding risking doing anything that's going to cause you problems, if that makes sense. So with all that being said, that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're going to move on to Cancer. Focus is on self as well as the past, and Pallas Athene continues to influence that house of self this week. What's very interesting to me about this setup here is the fact that in terms of focus on self, the house itself is very, very, very small. And that means that really the focus is not the most important focus. And therefore, it sort of leaves room for the past to have a very heavy influence on the person that you are today. When we add this warrior goddess influence to this, we're talking about somebody who's a fighter, and yet Cancers are not necessarily known for being fighters. They're not known for not being fighters either, but being a more emotional sign, I feel that there's a very strong pull that this is a time where you are strengthening yourself as a person, where you're working towards becoming a stronger person than you were yesterday. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. That doesn't mean that there's anything necessarily that you have to fix. In fact, in all honesty, I don't like using the word fix when it comes to human development. We're not fixing anything. We're just learning how to use what we already have in a way that is going to be helpful towards promoting ourselves towards whatever our goals are. So I feel like this is a really important time for you guys, because honestly, when it comes to personal development, emotional development, of course, is a big, huge part of that. And you are strongest when you can emotionally support yourself, or when you can use your feelings to understand who you are rather than be the victim of the circumstances around you, if that makes sense. So it's a very powerful time for you guys. I really feel this. And the past influence coming in is really the part that really could screw you up, if that makes sense. There's no planets influencing this at all this week. The moon's moved on. Mars isn't quite there yet. We're getting there, but Mars isn't quite in your sign yet. So I think the past, if anything, is going to be the downer. It's the focus of the past. And we do have a tendency to get caught up in situations that happen, ways we wish it had been different, all of these things that waste time. The key here is being able to look back on the past and seeing your improvement. You come from here and made it to here. And also looking at the things that maybe you can improve on that would help you from here on out. So you don't want to get stuck in that trap of beating yourself up over all the mistakes that you made. That's not going to help you, but to use that in a constructive way that's going to help you grow from this point forward. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Leo, focus continues to be on the mind and how you think this week. And we have no planets influencing that at all, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It just is what it is, right? In terms of focus on the mind and how you think, I feel that this is actually a very important time for you guys right now in terms of identifying your own mental process, which is something that develops over time automatically. We really don't necessarily have a lot of influence over it. A lot of past influences do influence it. There's a lot of reasons why we all of a sudden just have this one particular mental process that is an automatic process. And so we tend to be wired to look at things in a certain way, to be naturally optimistic, to be naturally pessimistic, to be naturally kind of in the middle. I think that's called realistic. Um, Knowing what your natural process is really helps you to be able to identify how that mental process may actually be working against you. Let me just go back here. Nobody is really, okay, I can't say that. Very few people are naturally wired to be positive. They are a very select few people. Most of us react to the negativity in the world and automatically become wired to be negative thinkers. And when you're a negative thinker, there's a couple of things that happen. The first thing is that it's very difficult to look at your life with a sense of gratitude and be a negative thinker, because those two things don't really go together very well. The other thing that happens is that it zaps your motivation. When you start to think about things in a negative way, you start to convince yourself that certain things are going to happen. And when you've already convinced yourself that all of these things are going to happen, the chances of you actually being motivated to do anything from here on out are just very low, because you've already convinced yourself that there's really no point to doing it. So this all of a sudden creates a space where a lot of people that I work with they're stuck, they're lost, they don't know which direction to go in. They get overly confused and they're overthinking everything. And when you simplify it in black and white, and what I usually do for most of my clients is simplify it in black and white. You have two options, pick one. Without thinking about it, just pick one. All of a sudden, you take all of that out and it becomes much easier. We're all pretty much wired to do that all the time. And rather than always calling me, which is fine if you want to, but rather than always calling me to do that, what you can do is take the time to identify with every situation that happens where your thoughts are automatically going to, and you have to pay attention, because this is something that just happens. We're not even aware that it's happening. We just, eventually we know it's happening, we get caught up in it, we decide to run with it and keep it going, and it starts to come out of our mouths, right? A better option than that, and one that has been helpful to me, is to be aware of what my thoughts are. And when I catch what my thoughts are, decide if I want to choose to keep thinking about it in that way. And if I choose to not keep thinking about it in that way, then I actively change the way that I'm thinking about it. So, for example, I just had an interview this morning. So there's a lot of things about this interview that I don't really care for. There's a lot of things that are a little out of my comfort zone that are a little bit scary. There's quite a few things that are actually really good about this opportunity. Bottom line here is I could focus on the negatives and then decide to convince myself that I don't want to go after that opportunity. And if I don't go after that opportunity, I could lose out on a lot of knowledge that I don't have that I could get paid to learn. However, if I look at it as a positive, this is a growth experience, this could help me expand my own business, this could do, I'm actually probably have a better chance of actually following up and trying to get this job. So it comes down to your brain and how your brain thinks about it. It's not just not being motivated. It's not laziness. It is your brain. And if you can identify how your brain is working against you, you can get a handle on that and take control of your life in a completely different way. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Virgo, focus is on the home this week with a little bit of an influence from the Lilith or dark moon most of the week, actually, kind of just right at the beginning of the week, just moving back into Virgo. And we'll be moving into retrograde actually by the middle of the week. So this is kind of interesting because in terms of, it's like half the week is forward movement, half the week is retrograde. The Lilith is very much about making major changes, and she's about going out of the box with those changes. So if it's almost like, well, her mythology is being restricted and hating the restrictions and busting out of that restricted lifestyle in order to do something that was absolutely against the rules at the time. And honestly, if they caught her, they would have hung her, to be honest with you. But she became a witch, and she became a woman who didn't really give a crap about what anybody said about her lifestyle. She did her. And when it comes to you Virgos and how you set up your environment and your home, that really is what it's all about. This is about me and what functions for me. And it's not so much a screw everybody else kind of a thing, but it's more of a, this is what I need in order to function. And it can actually be a control thing, if that makes sense. We all have them. Don't feel bad. Okay. We all have control issues. And this is just one way I feel that a lot of Virgos use their control issue is to control their environment as much as possible. Now, when that Lilith goes retrograde, all of a sudden you move from I have control of my environment to I have zero control over my environment. And the reason I feel why this is coming up is because it's a very important lesson for that need for control, if that makes sense. Understanding where that control comes from or that need for control comes from really makes a huge difference, because not every Virgo is controlling or I'm trying to think of the word that's normally used with Virgos, and I really can't think of the word. But, in terms of being nitpicky about how things are, not every Virgo is like that. I've known a lot of Virgos in my life, and not every Virgo is like that. But they all have that tendency in some way, shape, or form. So in terms of, you go from the extreme end of the spectrum to this Virgo controls everything in their environment and nothing can be moved in any possible way. Otherwise, the whole world's going to fall apart. Down to the Virgo that is just really fastidious about keeping their shoes bright and white and clean but everything else is total chaos and a mess. This week, I feel it is important to the lesson that you understand that trying to maintain some control over your environment and your things is okay to a point, but when it comes to sharing that environment with other people, there might be some problems. And so it's an opportunity for you to understand why you have to control your environment. Why does it make you comfortable to control your environment? You may actually learn a little something about yourself that you didn't even know, which is good. And it will help you to understand why that's so important, and maybe be able to be open to compromise a little bit more if that is something that is needed at this time. Even if you're not sharing your environment with other people, there's a million different things that can happen to an individual who has to have things just the way they are. There's always a person that comes in and infiltrates that in some way. So it basically, no, it's not hurting anybody if you have to micromanage your environment, but it is hurting you if you can't live without your environment being micromanaged. Then this is not about your environment. This is about something inside of you that needs to heal. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Libra, focus is on those you love this week, with no planets coming in to influence that whatsoever, which is actually kind of nice because it gives you an opportunity for a couple of different things. One, it gives you an opportunity to just spend time and maybe enjoy those people that you love. I think this is really a big thing these days. If you don't make the time, it just goes by, and it goes by, and it goes by, and then pretty soon 6 months have gone by and you haven't even hardly seen your spouse, don't even remember what they look like, kind of a thing. Definitely live in that world a lot in my own family, in my own relationship, and that's why it's important to say, okay, this is family day and we're going to spend time as a family. And because we're all very busy, and we want to be able to stay connected with each other. So I feel that that's a really big part of this week for you. But I also feel, because Ceres is still in Libra, and Ceres influence is on the home, and Ceres influence is also retrograde. And when we're talking about Ceres influence, Ceres is known as the great mother. So that retrograde, anytime anything is retrograde, it's sort of mirroring that back at you. And I feel like in some cases, what this is bringing into the week is a focus on the home, and the focus on those you love, specifically those that live in the home with you, and really identifying where it feels like maybe you are not being nurtured in that environment, if that makes sense. Now, if you are the quote unquote nurturer, which means basically the mom or the person that's in charge of the emotional well-being of everybody in the house, um, this is a very common problem, to feel like you're nurturing everybody and not getting that nurturing yourself. At the same time, I just want to say that every Libra I know is a martyr. They are self-sacrificial. They always have been. And if you are giving that space away, of course you're going to be upset about it because you don't have it anymore. A lot of times I feel that Libras do that because they feel if they sacrifice themselves, those sacrifices will be made for them. Ask me how many Libras I've seen actually had that happen. And the answer I'm going to give you is not very many. Okay. And in terms of instances of what they've given away and what they've gotten back in the process, not very much. It really doesn't work like that. And I feel like this is such a hard lesson for most Libras, because it's in their nature to be givers. And that's fine. You can be a giver. You just have to take away that expectation of getting anything out of it, period. That is not how the world works, and that's not how humans work as a rule. Some of them do, but sometimes it feels like it's few and far in between to find these people. So this week, I feel this opportunity really is going to open up. And my advice to you, if you feel like you're being pushed out of your house, or you feel like everything that is you is being pushed out by everybody else, you got to take a stand. You have to be the one to say, wait a minute, just because I'm not being nurtured by everybody around me like I feel I should be, does not mean that I can't give myself the nurturing that I need. And part of that is making sure that things are right in your environment in a way that makes you feel like you belong, if that makes sense. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving on to Scorpio, we're going to kick off the week with the moon in Scorpio because, hey, why not? Focus is on your day-to-day schedule. The moon's influence on Sunday is going to be in opposition with Uranus, and as well as squared with Saturn. Not quite a T-square, thankfully, but still a little bit of a challenge nonetheless. Uranus is focused right on the cusp of our support system as well as our trauma place, our trauma closet. So that's a little bit of a challenge, especially being in opposition with an emotional planet like the moon. And Saturn's focus is on long-term goals. So I feel like a couple of things are coming up with these particular challenges. One, um, a lot of times our long-term goals are not met because of old fears that have taken place around traumatic situations that have happened in the past. And 99% of the human population is held back by past trauma. It is not relevant to the present, but fear is a big deal, and it really is a thing. So I feel like in some cases, this is bringing up those fears and possibly making you second guess whether or not you can actually achieve the goals that you set out to do. The good news is the moon's trines with Neptune, the sun, and Mercury, which are all focused on career, actually helps open up some time in your schedule to really focus on those career goals. So maybe what this is doing is redirecting you to goals that make more sense now, and not necessarily saying that the goals that you came up with aren't good goals. Also, you want to make sure that you're not too strict on how you achieve these goals, because things do. The universe sort of throws something in and says, hey, take a look at this. And it may not look like it lines up with your goals, but actually it does absolutely line up with your goals when you think about it. So you want to be open-minded in terms of not necessarily veering off your goal path, but you want to be open-minded to all the different ways that you can use to be able to achieve those goals. Once the moon moves out of there, we don't have any other planets influencing your sign. So we're talking this big thing on Sunday, and then everything just kind of sort of calms down for the rest of the week. We are continuing to focus on our day-to-day schedule. So I kind of feel like a lot of this has to do with looking at your current schedule and eh, making changes as and when you need to. I feel like staying busy is one thing, but I just keep feeling that there needs to be some you time in there. There needs to be some play time in there. There needs to be some fun time in there. Without leaving space for that, things start to get really, really heavy after a while. And so I feel like I think this is coming up because you don't want challenges that took place at the beginning of the week to rule the rest of your week. It happened, it's in the past, let it go, move on, skip into whatever kind of fun stuff you can get yourself involved with. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And we're moving on to Sagittarius. Focus is on relationships, although the moon coming into your sign Monday and Tuesday is going to bring focus on your day-to-day schedule into the mix. Unfortunately, life is one of those crazy things, you know, where you're like, I'm gonna make a plan and this is what I'm gonna do, and I want to focus on my relationship. Let's have a nice little blind date here on Tuesday, and then the moon comes in and screws everything up. That's what I'm seeing with that. The moon's T-square with Saturn and the sun and Neptune is actually a pretty big challenge. Mars's focus is on your trauma closet, unfortunately. So we're bringing old anger coming up around this, and the sun and Neptune are focused on career. So I feel like a couple of things are sort of taking place here. One, emotional disturbances really throw a wrench in your perfectly well-oiled schedule. And emotional disturbances can come up in a million different forms. But it does take away your focus on what you're doing. And I feel like this is obviously a current emotional challenge that also has some roots in some past stuff. So couple of things with that. One, you want to be able to separate your current feelings with your past feelings. If you don't have time to sit down and really work towards healing those past feelings right now, then the least you can do is separate it. It gets much, much, much bigger when it hooks on to one of those inner child roots. And it doesn't have to be childhood, it could be adulthood. The other thing that I feel is really coming up with that is that I kind of feel that this situation is one of those situations that tends to produce an anger response every single time. So whether it's delays, or you got to an appointment on time but the doctor is late, kind of a thing. These are all things that a lot of people will just automatically get angry about, and usually the root to that is not the fact that people are late all the time. The root to that has everything to do with whether or not they have enough respect for you to be on time. The truth is that life happens, people are late. It just is what it is. You got 3 patients ahead of you and they were all late. It's not the doctor's fault. He's not disrespecting you by putting you off. It just, life happened and this is what's going on. And I feel like a lot of people these days just get so offended right off the bat when these things happen. The more you can avoid that, the easier it will be for you. I kind of see a few little wrenches being thrown into your schedules, which is definitely going to make things frustrating. So the more you can meditate through that and, kind of ease your way through that, the better. The moon is in a trine with Jupiter as well as Venus while it's in your sign as well, Monday and Tuesday. And both planets are very much focused on your support system. So also remember that you do have people that can help you out. And in terms of when you all of a sudden are overwhelmed by a lot of things that need to get done right now, you don't have to do it all on your own. You have a support system. Lean on it, as much as possible, even just a little bit. If somebody can take one little thing off your plate, it makes a huge difference to your overall success in getting everything done. Once we move past this whole moon being in your sign thing, things calm way down. So Monday and Tuesday, it sucks. Nobody likes a moon on Monday. Monday and Tuesday might be a little bit of a challenge. The rest of the week, things do seem to kind of sort of simmer down and calm down a little bit. And my last advice on this, really, I have been sort of paying attention to what I do in terms of these frustrating situations. And of course, it really depends on my mood at the time. And that's usually how it is with most of us. But honestly, my automatic reaction is always to get frustrated. I can't believe I'm sitting here. I can't believe they're already 5 minutes late for my appointment. I can't, blah, 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 right? And that's changing the energy that I'm putting into the day because it's taking it to this really irritated, negative place, which is only going to get worse from here on out if I keep doing that. The more open and flexible I am, the easier it is for me to get through all the challenges that take place because life is not perfect, because people aren't perfect. And it's as simple as that. So that's what I have for you guys this week. Moving into Capricorn, we are focused on finances, although we are bringing relationships into that focus about midweek when the moon moves into your sign, moving into opposition with Mars as it moves into your sign, which is a little bit of a challenge. Mars focus is very much on the inner closet, our inner trauma, where we hold our inner trauma. The moon focused on relationships. This is very much a classic case of a relationship with somebody or something happening within this relationship that is triggering a very old emotional response. So for instance, if you're in a current relationship that is just great, but you have an argument and they say something that mimics a past very traumatic relationship, it's going to trigger you, and it will trigger a defense response when that happens. It does it every single time. And that's usually when the fight gets much bigger after at that point, because of course you feel threatened and you have to stand up for yourself because you feel threatened. They may not have even meant it in the way that it came out. So in terms of your response, I mean, obviously, if you have to defend yourself, but make sure you have to defend yourself first before you decide to defend yourself. I think that's where we're going with that one. It would definitely make everything a lot easier and the conversation a lot shorter. The moon's trine with Venus is actually very helpful for all of this because Venus is focused on your support system. And if you are dealing with challenges within your relationships, you have people, a support system to go to kind of sort of help you get through that, if that makes sense. And when I say relationships, by the way, I don't want every Capricorn going, oh my God, my marriage is over. No, actually, relationships, we're talking about any kind of relationship that you have. We all have relationships with a lot of different people, and there are just times where we fight and we don't get along and situations happen. Basically, when this comes up, you want to make sure that you don't overreact to a point where you damage the relationship, at least not until you know for sure that there is a reason to do so. The moon continues in your sign into Thursday, um, moving into a trine with Uranus. Brain just went blank there for a second. Moving into a trine with Uranus, Uranus continues to be focused on your support system, and the moon's focus moves from relationships into finance. So we're actually showcasing support in both of these aspects of your life in terms of friends to talk to, about your relationships and people that are supporting you in terms of your financial goals, if that makes sense. We do also have a square with Jupiter. Jupiter is also focused on your support system. So I feel, and I, because Jupiter is all about go big or go home, I kind of feel like you're looking at it in terms of not having a huge support system, but Venus is there to remind you you don't need a huge support system, you need the right support system. So as long as you have support from two people who can support you in absolutely anything, you have all the support you need. You don't need 20 people. So that's kind of how that looks. In terms of the rest of the week, the moon, of course, moves on out of there and things really calm down. And before the moon gets there, things are pretty calm also. In terms of focus on relationships and finances, um, it's really important, I feel, for everybody to focus on your relationship with your finances. And what I mean, and I'm sure that Capricorns would know more about what I mean than any other sign. What I mean by that is how you're approaching your finances at this time, emotionally approaching your finances at this time. Obviously, most of the Capricorns that I've ever met, they work really, really hard for what they have. They tend to invest their money better or use their money better. But I feel that this week is an important time to understand how you look at money. If you are looking at money as in you want to have more money than anybody else in the world, okay, that might not be the best focus for you financially. If you have a good relationship with money in terms of it's not, I mean, I know people that when they're broke, they're in a bad mood. When they have money, they're in a good mood. So you always know when they have it or not. That's not necessarily a very good relationship with money if whether you have it or don't have it is emotionally affecting you. So understanding your emotional relationship with money is important because it helps you to create the goals that are best for you and your financial relationship and situation without bringing anything into it that doesn't matter to your particular goals. Everybody has an opinion on what you should do, but only you know what is the best thing for you to do. So that is what I have for you this week. And we are moving on to Aquarius as we officially say bye-bye now to Saturn, who is 0 degrees in Pisces. So he's really not gone yet, because he is still on the cusp, technically in Pisces, but he is still on the cusp. So we will feel that influence here for probably a couple of more weeks, and then it'll simmer down and he'll go away. Hopefully, as far away as possible before he goes retrograde, because I be honest with you, can't remember if he comes back or not. I kind of hope he doesn't. But it's been nice. I've been waiting for this chance to say goodbye to him, um, for sure, for quite a while now. His trine with Mars is still very much felt in Aquarius for the entirety of this week. Focus continues to be on long-term goals. Mars focus at this time is right on the cusp of our inner trauma and self. And this is actually very interesting, really. A trine is a very helpful aspect. And you think, why is bringing your inner trauma going to help at all, right? Especially for Aquarians who just like to pretend that we don't have inner trauma and move on. We can't do that. In fact, I learned years ago, being sick and emotional experiences and sick and emotional for a whole couple of years, about 10 years ago. That was the result of holding my anger in and deciding that I didn't need to hash it back up and deal with it. That's the result. I don't do that anymore, consequently, because it was very painful and really took up a lot more time than I wanted to take. I'll put it that way. So we don't do that anymore. And I definitely would advise all Aquarians to also do that. It's just not, I'm telling you, a year of being sick is just not worth it. In any case, when you have anger inside of you, current situations trigger that anger. All of the sudden, you're reacting to the current situation with anger that does not belong there. That becomes a problem and it gets in your way. And we Aquarians are very big thinkers. And when I say big thinkers, I mean this thing never stops. It just never shuts up. Unless you shut it up, it never shuts up. So we tend to overthink everything, which also makes us frustrated, which also causes this emotional anger response. It just keeps going downhill from there. So I really feel that Saturn's last message for us is to remind us of the responsibility of letting shit go. And it is our responsibility. Nobody else can take that responsibility for us. Saturn also is in a sextile with Venus. Venus is all about your support system. So it shows that you have support if you choose to use it. A lot of us are like, we don't need anybody. What are you talking about? Yeah. If you choose to use it, and I advise you to choose to use it, trust me, you could sit there and you could waste a lot of time thinking that you can do this on your own. I'm not sitting here and telling anybody that they can't, but I'm an Aquarius too, and I have been through this. And the more I tried to do it on my own, the longer and harder it was to get through it. When I reach out for help, my problem, I find a solution to my problem and I can move on. And that's really, really beneficial. We are going to have the moon moving into Aquarius. We're actually ending the week with that. Friday and Saturday, the moon comes in, doesn't quite get into conjunction with Saturn until the next day, so the beginning of next week. The moon square with Uranus is a little bit of a challenge, specifically when Uranus is focused on your support system. And at this time, it means that it seems that you don't have the support that you need for your goals. Now, this happens a lot, actually, because you sit down with your family and you say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And they go, oh, yeah, well, I'll support you. We'll give you a space to work. We'll be quiet. We'll do this. We'll do that. And then when the time comes for them to pay up and do that, they don't do that. And this creates an emotional response because to me personally, I get offended by it. I'm like, I've done all this stuff for you. The least you could do is shut up. Right? Well, I'm trying to get my stuff done. Honestly, though, when I don't look at it that way, when I look at it as what am I missing? What are they trying to communicate to me? And I take the time to understand and I take the time to explain it, not in a rude way, but in a way that is constructive. 9 times out of 10, I can get to the bottom of the problem without having to have that emotional outburst, if that makes sense. And we don't want to have an emotional outburst. I mean, that's just, it takes up a lot of energy. And these days it affects me physically every single time. I just don't want to do that. So outside of that moon in coming in at the end of the week, it's going to emotionally shake things up. It always does, just a little bit. It's not what we like to deal with, but it's not going to kill us either. So, let's just learn from it and move on as best we can and stick to the goals that we've set, because that's all it comes down to. Everything outside of those goals is just a distraction and an excuse as to why you didn't follow through. That's it. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And finally, we're moving on to Pisces. We have the Sun, Mercury, and Neptune all moving into a conjunction with each other this week. Focus is on career at this time. And we have actually some very interesting things that are sort of coming out of that um, currently this week. We're going to start with the three planets all moving into a square with Mars. So this is actually something that really takes place for most of the week. Actually, I would say all of the week because it is prevalent. Yes, so all of the week. As these planets move together to work together, they move into this very difficult aspect with Mars, and Mars' focus is right on the cusp, right in the middle of self, and in terms of our physical selves, what we're putting out into the world, and our trauma closet, what we're keeping locked inside and hidden from everybody else. And you can hide it, but it absolutely has an effect on how you deal with certain situations now, because a lot of those fears are actually ruling your actions now. So what basically comes out of this is, in terms of moving forward in your career goals, there is a danger that this old frustration, this old anger, these old fears are stopping you from moving forward. Now, here's a good example of that. Somebody who has worked the same job, always been a secretary, always been an office worker, never done anything else, is all of a sudden presented with opportunity to apply to be the office manager, to be the person that's running everything, right? Now you're no longer one of the workers, you're going to be in charge of the department. If you 10 years ago decided to go after a job like that and were told you're not management material, all of a sudden bounce back to present, and those words, you're not management material, are all of a sudden going to stop you from even applying for this job now. Two things could have happened. One, that person didn't like you and didn't want to hire you anyways. Maybe you weren't office or management material back then, but it's been 10 years. You have to take into consideration all the things that you've learned up until this point. You might absolutely be management material right now. So I feel like this is an opportunity when these situations come up to really identify, is this a fear from the past that is making my decision? If that's the case, I want to nip that in the bud. We're going to separate what happened then and only focus on what I need to do now. And the only thing about then that should be prevalent is anything that happened in that situation that might be detrimental to this situation. You want to avoid doing any of those things. Um, we do have opportunities, however, as the sun, Mercury, and Neptune all move into sextiles with Uranus. Uranus is very much focused on your support system, although it is moving into focus on that trauma closet as well. But when in terms of your support system, it's really important also, because I feel that in many cases, this when you're in a situation like this, when you're presented with, I have, all of a sudden you go from this amount of work to a lot more work, it feels like a lot. And it may not seem like you have a support system, but Uranus's energy is really reminding you to look outside the box, not just at the normal people you would always go to for support, but all the other people out there that you do have to support you, and maybe fall back on some of those people a little bit. You're Pisces, and most Pisces that I know are extremely sociable people, so you know a lot of people, right? You may actually connect with somebody and realize that they could have been supporting you and you could have been supporting them for a really long time, but you didn't have the right conversation back then, so it didn't happen. And that kind of stuff happens all the time. So that's what I have for you guys this week. And that's what I have for everybody. I'm Melissa Bruce, the heavy metal psychic. Thank you for hanging out and enjoying the horoscopes. I hope you enjoy them anyways. That's all I have for this week. So I will see you guys next week. Hey, make it a great week, everybody.